The sun was low, casting a golden light over the small alien village. Children ran between the houses, their laughter mixing with the sounds of animals tied near wooden posts. In the middle of the dirt road stood a young human boy, clutching a basket filled with bright red apples. They were fresh, still shining from the morning dew, and their sweet smell spread through the air. He had picked them himself, guarding them with pride because fruit was precious in these parts. The boy's hands were small, but his grip on the basket was firm. He knew his family needed those apples. His little sister was waiting at home, hungry. His mother had told him, "Don't lose them. Every apple is a meal." He had promised he would return with all of them safe. But he was not alone. From the shadows of the nearby stone wall, a figure moved silently. The villagers did not notice, but the boy felt it, a cold gaze resting on him. His heart beat faster. He turned his head slowly. An alien soldier stepped out of the shadows. His armor was dented from battles long past, his eyes sharp and hollow. Hunger lived in those eyes, and desperation too. The soldier was tall, broad-shouldered, and far stronger than any villager. His boots crunched against the dirt as he walked forward, gaze locked on the apples. The boy froze. His mouth went dry. He had heard stories about soldiers, how they took what they wanted, how no one dared stop them. And now one stood before him, reaching for his basket. The soldier's hand stretched out, fingers brushing the top apple. The boy's chest tightened. He remembered his mother's voice again and his promise. His small body trembled, but something inside him refused to step aside. The soldier grunted. "Hungry?" he muttered, his voice deep and rough, almost like growling. "These will do." The boy swallowed hard. His eyes darted to the villagers nearby, but they had stopped in their tracks. Some looked away, afraid. Others whispered to one another but made no move to help. No one dared to interfere with a soldier. The soldier's hand gripped an apple, ready to pull it free. That was when the boy did something no one expected. With shaking hands, he placed the basket carefully on the ground. Then he bent, grabbed a simple wooden stick lying near his feet, and lifted it high. His arms were thin, and the stick was worn and rough, but he held it tightly like it was a sword forged in fire. His heart pounded, but his eyes stayed on the soldier. The villagers gasped. Whispers spread like fire through dry grass. "The boy, he's raising a stick to a soldier." The alien soldier froze for a moment, shocked by the sight of a child daring to resist him. His lips curled into a grin, though it was more cruel than amused. "You think that will stop me?" he asked, pointing at the stick. His voice carried both disbelief and mockery. The boy did not answer. His throat was too tight with fear. But his eyes spoke loudly. They refused to yield. His arms trembled, but the stick stayed raised. The air grew heavy with silence. Even the children stopped laughing. Even the animals grew restless, shifting uneasily. The sun dipped lower and long shadows stretched across the road. The soldier stepped forward. His boots struck the ground like drumbeats of war. Each step brought him closer to the boy. Yet the boy did not back away. He lifted the stick higher, his chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. The villagers watched in horror. One woman covered her mouth. An old man whispered, "He's just a child. He'll be killed," another muttered, "But look at him. He doesn't move." The soldier stopped just before the stick could touch his chest. He looked down at the boy, his grin fading into a scowl. The boy's reflection shone in his cold alien eyes. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The boy's small figure, armed with nothing but wood, faced the towering soldier, armed with strength and authority. The difference between them was like a flame against a storm. And yet that flame did not die. The soldier's hand tightened around the apple, but the boy's stick hovered, ready to strike. Neither moved. The villagers held their breath, knowing something unforgettable was about to happen. Suspense filled the air like a thick fog. A simple village boy, his family's survival resting in his hands, had chosen to defy a soldier. One wrong move could mean the end, but also, one brave stand could change everything. And so the part begins, with a wooden stick raised against steel, and the world waiting to see who would move first. The village road felt like a stage where silence ruled, and every heartbeat echoed louder than sound. The alien soldier loomed tall, with his armored frame casting a long shadow across the ground, and before him the boy stood small but unbroken, holding his wooden stick as if it were a blade forged from courage. Villagers watched with wide eyes, some whispering prayers, some clutching each other as if expecting the child to fall at any moment. Yet the boy's stance did not break. The soldier's lips curled into a sneer. his voice low but sharp enough to cut the air. He mocked the child's defiance, saying a twig cannot wound iron and a boy cannot stand against a soldier. But the boy did not answer with words. His silence spoke louder than cries. His eyes locked on the soldiers like fire, refusing to bow to wind. The alien paused for a moment, for though he was stronger, and feared, his pride twisted at the thought that a mere child dared to stare at him without fear. The boy's small chest rose and fell with quick breaths, sweat sliding down his brow, but the stick stayed high, his knuckles white from holding it. Villagers gasped at every twitch of the soldier's hand, expecting violence, expecting the boy to fall bleeding onto the dirt. But the soldier instead took a slow step forward, each step a warning drumbeat in the tense air. The crowd shuffled back, but the boy remained rooted like an old tree unmoved by storm. The alien's hand reached again for the apples, fingers brushing the red skin of the fruit, but as he leaned closer, the stick struck out suddenly. Wood met iron with a sharp crack that rang through the street. The soldier's arm jerked back in surprise. Not hurt but stunned by the audacity, gas erupted. Some villagers covered their mouths in disbelief, while others clapped hands to their chests as if they had just seen a spirit rise from the boy. The soldier's eyes narrowed, his pride bruised. His armor was strong, yet the child's strike pierced deeper than any blade, for it struck his honor. He growled low in his throat, shame crawling over him as whispers from the villagers grew louder, their fear mixing with awe. Their voices carried a dangerous weight, for even soldiers feared humiliation before the eyes of the people. The boy raised the stick again, his thin arms trembling but steady, his legs shaking yet locked to the ground. The soldier stepped closer again, his towering figure now inches away. He could crush the child with a single blow, but hesitation gripped him. The boy's gaze did not waver. Those eyes reflected something he had not seen in years. Unyielding defiance from someone so powerless. A reminder of battles long ago when he too had been small, facing giants with nothing but will. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some said the boy was foolish, others said he was chosen by fate. Old women clutched charms and prayed aloud. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts. The scene burned into their memory like fire on wood, for they saw a boy who would not bow and a soldier whose pride cracked under the weight of a child's courage. The soldier gritted his teeth, his hand hovering near his weapon, temptation to end this insult rising strong. Yet with each second his chest tightened, anger fought with shame, hunger wrestled with pride. The boy's stick wavered slightly but did not fall. Villagers leaned forward breathless, waiting for the next move. Suspense hung thick in the air like storm clouds ready to break. The alien growled again, this time louder, trying to drown the whispers, but whispers only grew stronger. Some dared to cheer the boy, their voices small yet sharp enough to cut his pride further. The soldier clenched his fists. His armor creaked as his muscles tensed, but deep inside something cracked, not armor but spirit. For he realized the more he pressed, the more the child grew taller in the eyes of all who watched, and so the road remained a battlefield without swords. A boy's stick raised high against steel, a soldier caught between hunger and honor, and a village holding its breath, waiting to see if courage would shatter fear or if fear would swallow courage whole. The world seemed to stop turning, and the outcome balanced on the edge of a simple wooden stick. The sun lowered further, painting the village road in orange and shadow. The boy stood rooted with his stick raised high while the alien soldier loomed before him with hungry eyes. The villagers had begun to gather, pulled by whispers and the rising tension. Women carrying water jars stopped mid-step. Old men leaning on canes shuffled closer. Children clung to their mothers' skirts, peeking with wide, curious eyes. The quiet village had turned into a circle of watchers, all holding their breath. The boy's chest rose quickly. His arms ached. Yet he did not lower the stick. Sweat ran down his neck, but his grip never faltered. The alien soldier's pride burned hotter with each passing second, for every whisper in the crowd cut him deeper than the wooden strike. He could hear them murmur words of shock and disbelief, some whispering that the boy was reckless, others daring to call him brave. Each murmur was like a spark feeding the fire of his shame. The soldier shifted his weight forward, his boots grinding against dirt, his towering figure casting the boy into deeper shadow. Still the boy's gaze did not break. Villagers gasped at the closeness of man and soldier. Child with nothing but a stick facing a warrior wrapped in armor. The difference was like a pebble before a mountain. Yet the pebble did not roll away. It stayed lodged and unmoving. From the crowd, voices rose uncertain and trembling. An old woman cried for the boy to step back to save himself. A man cursed under his breath, calling the soldier a coward for taking food from a child. Others argued in whispers, fear battling anger in their hearts. The tension grew heavier than stone, the air thick with the weight of many eyes watching two figures bound in silent battle. The boy's sister appeared at the edge of the gathering, her small hands clutching their mother's dress, her eyes filled with hunger and fear as she looked at the basket on the ground and at her brother's trembling stance. Her soft whimper carried into the silence, striking deeper than any weapon. The boy heard it and his resolve hardened, his arm shaking less now as if her voice had poured strength back into him. The soldier's eyes flicked to the little girl, then back to the boy. For a fleeting second something stirred within him, but pride smothered it quickly. He could not be seen weak, not before these villagers, not before the child who dared to oppose him. His jaw clenched tight, his hand hovered near the hilt of his blade, yet he hesitated, for drawing it would brand him as a tyrant who struck down children, and though he was feared, he knew fear was different from respect. The villagers sensed his hesitation and their whispers turned bolder. Some began to murmur that perhaps the boy could win without striking again, that perhaps the soldier would back away. These whispers angered the alien more than the strike itself. His pride now balanced against the eyes of the people, the shame of retreat burning hot, but the shame of cruelty burning hotter. The boy took a single step forward, his stick pointing higher now, his small frame seeming larger against the weight of silence. Villagers gasped again at his daring move. Even the soldier blinked at the sudden defiance. In that instant the boy became more than a child. He became a symbol of refusal, a living voice that said no to fear. The crowd tightened its circle, the air heavy with suspense. The soldier shifted again, his face dark with rage yet shadowed with doubt. The boy's sister clutched her mother tighter, her eyes shining with both terror and pride. The villagers leaned closer, every soul waiting to see if the soldier would strike or bend, if the boy's flame would burn or be crushed. And so the moment stretched longer than any hour. A soldier chained by pride and hunger, a boy lifted by promise and courage, and a village suspended between silence and eruption, each breath a drumbeat of fate, each whisper a spark ready to ignite. The standoff grew unbearable, the outcome uncertain, the world holding still as if it too waited to see which side would break first. The circle of villagers pressed tighter as silence wrapped around them, heavier than stone. The alien soldier's chest heaved with pride and anger, while the boy's small figure stood steady with his wooden stick raised like a banner. Every eye followed them. Every whisper sharpened the edge of tension. The soldier could not retreat without losing face, yet striking a child risked losing the last fragments of honor he carried, and so the air between them became a battlefield without steel. The soldier stepped closer, his boots pounding the dirt like thunder, and the boy's knuckles whitened around the stick. Yet he did not step back. The villagers gasped as the soldier's hand shot forward toward the basket again. But in that same heartbeat the boy swung. The wood cracked against iron with a sharp echo that rolled through the crowd like lightning. The soldier jerked back, not wounded but shocked, his face twisting with disbelief. A child had dared strike him again. His pride screamed louder than his hunger. He bared his teeth in a low growl as the crowd erupted with gasps and shouts. Some cried for the boy to flee. Others cheered him with voices trembling yet fierce. The balance of fear shifted grain by grain as courage spread like fire in dry grass. The soldier felt it burning into his skin, more painful than any weapon. The boy's arms shook, but he raised the stick higher again, sweat dripping down his brow mixing with dust, his breath ragged but his eyes sharp. In those eyes the soldier saw not fear but command. A command that said stop and yield. The soldier's scowl deepened as memories clawed at him. Memories of being young and small, standing against giants who mocked him. The memory cut into his rage, leaving him momentarily paralyzed. The villagers leaned forward, their whispers swelling into a tide. Some shouted that the boy was no ordinary child. Some claimed spirits guarded him. Children stared wide-eyed, their hearts pounding with new belief that even the smallest could rise against the strong. The soldier heard it all, and every word made his armor feel heavier, shame wrapping around him like chains. The soldier's fist clenched tight. His arm twitched near his weapon, but his gaze flickered again to the boy's sister in the crowd, her frightened face, her hollow eyes staring at the apples on the ground. A pang struck through his chest, though he tried to bury it beneath pride. The boy saw that flicker and stepped closer, his stick steady and unshaking, and in that step the crowd saw a tide turning. The clash was no longer of wood against armor, it was pride against courage, power against spirit, hunger against promise. Each heartbeat thudded like a drum echoing across the dirt road. The soldier's breath grew heavier, his chest rising and falling like a storm, yet the boy stood as still as a stone before the river, refusing to be swept away. The villagers began to murmur, louder voices climbing higher. They called for the soldier to leave. They praised the boy as brave. They hissed insults at the alien's shame. Their courage, born from the boy's defiance, poured into the air thick and unstoppable. The soldier's face burned red with fury, yet within it a shadow of doubt crept stronger with each word. Then, with sudden movement, the soldier reached again, but the boy's stick cracked against his gauntlet, forcing him back once more. Gasps turned to shouts as villagers cheered openly. The soldier staggered not from pain but from humiliation, his pride torn before the eyes of all, and the boy's stance grew taller in that moment as if he had grown years in a breath. The soldier roared, shaking the air, yet the sound no longer carried fear, but desperation. The villagers did not scatter this time. They stood rooted, emboldened by the sight of a child holding ground, and the soldier realized that the more he pressed, the more power the boy gathered. Every strike, every stand weaving strength into the people around him, turning their fear into courage. So the standoff deepened, the soldier's rage boiling yet caged by doubt, the boy's arms weary yet lit by fire, and the villagers' voices swelling into thunder. The clash of wills had become larger than two figures on a dusty road. It had become a war of spirit that would decide not only who would claim the apples but who would command the respect of all who watched. And the answer trembled on the edge of the next heartbeat, waiting to break. The alien soldier stood trembling with fury, his armor rattling as his chest rose and fell like a drum of war. The villagers no longer silent but chanting softly for the boy, voices that once hid in fear now carried courage, their words cutting deeper into the soldier than the wooden stick could ever do. Shame burned through his veins hotter than hunger, yet pride screamed louder, demanding that he restore the honor that had slipped from his grasp before their eyes. The boy remained unyielding, his stick lifted though. His arms ached and his body swayed under the weight of exhaustion. Sweat soaked his hair and dust clung to his skin. Yet the fire in his eyes burned steady. He thought of his mother's voice reminding him that the apples meant life for his sister, and that promise gave him strength beyond flesh. It made his small frame appear like a wall that no storm could topple. The soldier snarled, his hand now gripping the hilt of his weapon. The villagers gasped, fearing that blood would spill. Some shouted for him to stop. Others pulled children behind them as if steel would soon flash. Yet the soldier hesitated, for though rage commanded him to strike, another voice inside whispered that to cut down a child would not silence the shame, but carve it forever into his name. His pride demanded violence, his spirit recoiled, and he stood caught between two fires that burned him from within. The boy, sensing the shift, took a step forward, the stick pointing directly at the soldier's chest, his legs trembling but refusing to bend. The crowd erupted in louder shouts now, no longer whispers but cries of support. Old men raised their fists, women called blessings, children cheered with thin voices that carried into the dusk air. The alien soldier's rage grew heavier, for the boy had become more than defiance. He had become a spark that lit every heart around him. The soldier growled and lifted his weapon halfway, the blade catching the last light of the sinking sun. A shiver ran through the crowd. Fear returned like a shadow, crawling quickly over their courage. Yet still the boy stood, his stick raised unwavering, and for a breath the image was burned into every soul. A towering armored warrior against a fragile child with nothing but wood. Yet the strength of will in the boy's eyes outshone the steel itself. The soldier's hand trembled, though he tried to steady it, his own reflection glaring back at him through the eyes of the boy. Memories rushed unbidden of when he himself had once been small, facing cruelty, with nothing but stubborn resolve. The memory struck hard, piercing through the storm of rage, and though he clenched his jaw and tried to ignore it, the boy's defiance carved open the truth he had buried under armor and pride, truth that he too had once stood as weak yet unbroken. The villagers began to chant the boy's name, their voices uniting into a single rising wave, the air filled with sound that carried power. The soldier's blade wavered and lowered slightly, though anger still burned within him. The boy raised his chin higher, his voice finally breaking the silence as he shouted that these apples belonged to his family, and no soldier would take them. His words, though cracked with youth, rang clear like a bell, strong enough to shake the hearts of all who listened. The soldier staggered as if struck not by wood but by truth, his rage still alive but hollow now. For he knew striking the boy would not restore his honor, it would crush the last respect he still held in his own eyes. His pride fought to scream, but his spirit fought to breathe. And so he stood trembling, weapon hovering yet spirit faltering, surrounded by a crowd that now saw him not as a conqueror, but as a man cornered by a child's courage. The standoff burned longer than fire, yet colder than silence. A soldier drowning in rage yet gasping for honor, a boy fragile in body yet unbreakable in will, and a village that had once bowed in fear now daring to lift its voice. The outcome hung in the air heavy as thunder, waiting for the soldier to choose whether to let his pride devour him or to yield before the strength of a stick held by a child who refused to kneel. The village square stood frozen in the fading light as if time itself feared to move forward. The alien soldier's hand still hovered near his weapon, his chest rising and falling in waves of fury and doubt. The boy stood before him, small yet unmoving, with his wooden stick pointing firm. And around them the villagers pressed closer, their whispers shaping into chants, their fear melting into defiance. The air so thick with tension it felt like a rope stretched to its breaking point. The soldier's eyes burned with shame. He saw not only the boy's face but also the faces of the villagers reflecting judgment back at him. He was a warrior once honored for strength, yet here he stood trembling before a child. Hunger gnawed at his body, but humiliation gnawed deeper at his soul. He thought of battles fought where enemies with steel in their hands had fallen under his blade, yet none of them had ever pierced him like this boy with a stick of wood and eyes that refused to lower. The boy's arms ached, yet he gripped tighter. His legs quivered, yet he locked them to the ground. His thoughts carried him back to the promise he had made, to protect the apples for his sister who waited hungry at home. The promise was heavier than fear, heavier than weakness. It was the anchor that kept him rooted, and so he stared at the towering soldier without flinching, his courage growing each time the soldier hesitated. The villagers could see the cracks forming in the soldier's pride. Their voices grew bolder. Some cried that the boy had already won, for the soldier dared not strike. Others demanded the alien leave. The sound rolled like a storm rising behind the child, a storm born not of fear but of unity. Each word struck the soldier harder than any blade, pressing him deeper into doubt. The soldier growled, shaking his head as if to cast away weakness, but his eyes betrayed him, for they lingered once more on the little girl, clinging to her mother in the crowd. Her hollow cheeks, her wide frightened eyes stabbed into him like arrows of memory. He saw himself long ago, a boy hungry and powerless, standing before soldiers who mocked him. He had sworn never to feel that pain again, yet here he was staring at the reflection of his past in the eyes of this human child, and it broke through the armor he had built within. His grip loosened on the weapon hilt, though his pride screamed against it. He fought to keep his anger alive, yet it slipped like sand through fingers. The villagers saw it too, their chanting louder, their courage swelling as they sensed the tide turning. The boy, noticing the hesitation, stepped forward half a pace, his stick firm against the soldier's chest. A gesture so small yet carrying the weight of thunder, the crowd erupted in shouts, and the soldier staggered back one step, not from force but from the crushing weight of his own shame. For the first time the boy's voice rose again, clear, though strained. He told the soldier to leave the apples, to remember his own honor, to understand that strength was not in taking from the weak but in protecting them. His words, though simple, rang like iron through the air, and the soldier felt them strike deeper than hunger, deeper than pride. They struck the core he had long buried, the part of him that once believed in honor before it was stained by survival and cruelty. The villagers fell silent, waiting. The soldier's weapon arm lowered further until it hung at his side, his eyes locked on the boy's unwavering stare, his breaths heavy like storm clouds ready to burst. The crowd leaned forward, hearts pounding. Would he strike in a final burst of rage, or would he surrender to the truth burning in his chest? At last, with a growl that shook more of his pride than the ground, the soldier pulled his hand fully away from the weapon. His knees bent slightly as if the weight of defeat had crushed him, yet within that defeat a glimmer of something unfamiliar stirred. Respect. For he had faced countless warriors, but never one so small with courage so vast. He lowered his head, unwilling yet compelled, and the boy kept the stick raised a moment longer until sure the threat had passed. And so the moment balanced between fury and surrender. Tipped at last. The soldier bowed before the will of a child. The villagers erupted in cries of triumph. The boy stood taller than his size, and the night carried the echo of change, for the turning point had come and nothing in the village would remain the same again. The alien soldier knelt low, his head bowed, the weight of silence pressing on every shoulder around him. The villagers who once trembled in fear now burst into cheers, their voices rolling like a wave across the square. They had witnessed something no blade or shield had ever shown them, the strength of a boy armed with nothing but a wooden stick and the fire of his promise. Their hearts swelled with pride, their eyes shining with belief that courage could indeed stand taller than armor. The boy lowered his stick. Slowly, though, his grip did not loosen until the soldier's hands had left the apples. His chest heaved with exhaustion, his arms heavy as stone, yet his spirit burned bright. He bent only to lift the basket again, holding it close to his chest as if guarding treasure. His sister cried with relief, clinging to their mother, while her brother stood like a hero, though his small frame shook from fatigue. The soldier raised his head and his eyes met the boy's once more, no longer with hunger or rage but with something unfamiliar. Respect. His voice when it came was rough and low, admitting that he had taken food before from the weak but never had he been stopped by one so small. He confessed that the strike of wood had cut deeper than steel, for it had struck his pride and forced him to see the man he had become, a shadow of what once was honorable. The villagers pressed closer, listening to every word. Some muttered that the soldier spoke truth. Others, still wary, yet all could feel that something had shifted. The boy's defiance had not only defended apples, it had broken the chains of fear that bound the village. For now they saw that even the weakest could resist and even the strongest could yield, a lesson etched into their souls like fire across dry earth. The boy did not speak much, his silence more powerful than words. His eyes locked on the soldier, carrying no hatred, only firmness. The soldier finally stood tall again, but this time without menace. He turned to the crowd and declared that he would not take from them again. His hunger still gnawed, but his spirit demanded a different path. He would find his survival not by stealing from children, but by earning through labor or service. His voice quivered as though ashamed yet determined to change. The villagers murmured uncertain, but the boy's small nod gave weight to the soldier's vow. That nod carried forgiveness not in words but in action, a recognition that even an enemy could be given a chance if respect was shown. The soldier bowed once more before the boy, a gesture that carved itself deep into every memory in that square. Never before had a soldier bent to a child. Never before had pride been set aside in the face of courage. The boy's mother pushed through the crowd, tears in her eyes as she embraced her son, her whispers of gratitude carried to those near her. The soldier looked away, his own chest tight, the sight of family bound in love striking him harder than hunger, for he realized he had fought not against a stick but against a promise stronger than any armor, a promise that had given the boy power beyond size. As the sky turned deep with twilight, the villagers dispersed, their voices still buzzing with the story they would tell for generations. The boy walked home with his mother and sister, the apples safe. The stick still in his hand, his steps slow yet proud. Behind him the soldier lingered alone in the square, staring at his own hands as though seeing them for the first time. Hands that had once taken but might now protect. The night closed around the village, carrying whispers of change. The boy had earned not only safety for his family, but respect from a warrior and courage for his people. The soldier had lost his pride yet gained the chance for redemption, and in the heart of every villager bloomed a new truth, that true strength is not measured in armor or weapons, but in the will to stand when no one else dares. And so respect was earned, and the world within they